The single mom cleaned the CEO's office at night and found a childhood photo of herself on his desk. Chicago after dark always felt like another world. The skyscrapers glowed against the fog, their windows blinking like tired stars. And somewhere beneath all that glitter, on the 32nd floor of Sterling Dynamics, a woman pushed a cleaning cart through the empty halls. Her name was Maya Lopez, 29. A single mom with dreams she'd folded away between grocery lists and overdue bills. Every night, while the city slept, Maya worked her way through the silence. Desks, windows, floors, one by one, until dawn began to leak through the blinds. Sometimes she hummed softly, just to remind herself she still had a voice. Sometimes she thought her little boy, Leo, curled up on a couch at Mrs. Henson's apartment 2 blocks away, safe, warm, waiting for morning. She'd tell him she cleaned the sky buildings, and he'd giggle, asking if the stars ever looked back. Maya didn't mind the quiet. It was the only time the world stopped demanding things from her. Here, among the polished floors and humming computers, she could think. She could remember who she used to be, before life became survival. Tonight, though, something felt different. The air carried a stillness she couldn't name, as if the building itself were holding its breath. She paused at a glass door that led to the CEO's office, a place she usually saved for last, partly because it was spotless already, partly because it felt like trespassing into another universe. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The faint scent of cedar and cologne met her, a smell that didn't belong to night workers like her. The office was vast, shadowed, elegant. A wall of windows revealed the sleeping city, tiny cars crawling like sparks far below. Maya moved toward the desk, wiping its already clean surface out of habit. And that's when she saw it. A small photograph, tucked beneath a paperweight. Old, faded, the edges curled from years of handling. She leaned closer. Her hand stopped midair. The girl in the picture, the messy brown hair, the missing front tooth, the red balloon she'd once begged her mother for at the community fair. It was her. Maya's breath caught. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. What was her childhood photo doing here? On the desk of Daniel Sterling, the most private, powerful man in the city. Her heartbeat filled the silence. Questions raced, impossible ones. She reached out, fingertips trembling, tracing the edge of the frame like it might explain itself. And then she heard footsteps in the hallway. Maya froze. No one ever came back this late. The cleaning staff were the last souls left after 9. The steps grew louder. Steady, certain. She set the frame down, too fast. It tilted slightly. Her pulse hammered as she turned toward the door, hoping, praying, whoever was wouldn't notice she'd been there. That was the moment everything changed. The night the single mom met the man who kept her photo on his desk, and neither of them knew their lives were about to collide again. Maya's fingers still tingled from touching the photograph. Even after stepping away, her eyes kept drifting back to it, like a secret calling her name. The door creaked open behind her. She spun around, almost knocking over her cleaning cart. A tall man stood in the doorway, broad shoulders, calm eyes, the kind of presence that made silence feel heavy. Daniel Sterling, the CO. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not at midnight. Not when people like her were invisible. Their eyes met. For a second, neither spoke. "I didn't mean to intrude," Maya stammered, gripping the handle of her cart. "I was just finishing up." Daniel stepped inside, loosening the cuff of his sleeve. His voice was steady but low. "You're not intruding. You're just doing your job." Something about the way he said it, quiet, unassuming, disarmed her. Still, she took a step back, unsure if she should explain why she was standing near his desk. But then his gaze followed hers to the photo. For the first time, she saw something shift in his expression, recognition, and something deeper, gentler, almost painful. He crossed the room, picked up the frame, and brushed his thumb along its corner like it was fragile. "You found it," he said softly. Maya blinked. I didn't mean to. I thought it looked familiar." He smiled faintly, not the polished kind he probably used in meetings, but something raw, almost human. "It should. That's you." The words hit harder than she expected. Her knees nearly gave out. "How do you have this?" she whispered. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, then set the photo back on the desk. "It was taken at a community fair," he said slowly. "Summer of 2002. You were about 6. Her pulse raced. "Yes, but how do you know that?" He let out a quiet breath. "Because I was there too." Maya searched his face, but there was no hint of a lie, no trace of the distant, untouchable CEO people talked about, only sincerity. She tried to remember. A fair, cotton candy, her mother's laughter, brief and tired, and a boy, a shy boy with messy hair and a cast on his arm, sitting alone on the curb while other kids ran past. "You," she said suddenly, her voice trembling. "You were the boy who shared his cotton candy with me." Daniel nodded slowly. "And you gave me your balloon because I couldn't reach the stand with my broken arm." Maya's throat tightened. "That was you?" He smiled faintly. "I kept the photo ever since. Your mom took it, remember? She said she wanted us to freeze the moment." Maya swallowed hard. Her mother had passed away 3 years later. She'd forgotten that day, or maybe she just buried it deep because life got too hard to remember the gentle parts. "But why would you keep it all these years?" she asked. Daniel's gaze softened. "Because it reminded me that kindness exists, that even when people have nothing, they can still give something." Maya looked down. Tears threatened to fall. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the polished desk surface. "You don't even know me," she murmured. He shook his head slowly. "I think I've known you longer than you realize." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the city lights flickered against the glass, silent witnesses to a memory that had survived decades. She felt exposed, like her entire life had been quietly observed without her knowing, and yet, somehow, it didn't feel invasive, it felt seen. Daniel finally said, "I didn't mean for you to find out like this. I kept it because I owed that little girl more than she'll ever know." Maya's eyes lifted, confusion and emotion tangled in her chest. "Owed me?" He hesitated, his jaw tightening as if holding back something heavier. "Because of that day," he said quietly, "I decided to change my life. I was angry at the world back then. You were the first person who smiled at me without wanting anything. You showed me what decency looked like." Maya's voice shook. "That was just a balloon." "No," he said softly. "That was hope." The room fell silent again, the kind of silence that felt like the start of something. For the first time, Maya didn't feel like a cleaner standing in her boss's office. She felt like someone from a story, someone who mattered once, and maybe still did. And neither of them realized it yet. But that rediscovered photograph had just reopened a chapter they'd both forgotten they were still part of. Daniel didn't sleep that night. The city outside his window was alive with lights, but his thoughts stayed tangled in the image of her face. Not from the photograph, but from just hours ago. The shock in her eyes, the tremor in her voice. He'd seen countless people pass through those hallways, but none of them had ever stopped him the way Maya did. Maybe because she carried something he'd lost. Quiet strength, unspoken warmth, the kind that doesn't ask to be noticed. The next morning, he returned to the office earlier than usual. The sun hadn't yet cleared the skyline. The hall still smelled faintly of cleaning soap, her scent faint but there. He noticed a photo she left perfectly aligned, no trace of the moment they'd shared, almost as if she wanted to erase it. He smiled just slightly. She was careful, private, proud. For a man who was used to power and distance, it was strange to feel this pull, not desire, but something gentler, recognition. When Maya walked in later that evening for her shift, she froze to see him still there. He looked up from his desk, tired but genuine. "You came back," she said quietly. "I never really left," he replied. "I just forgot where I started." Their eyes held for a moment that felt longer than it should have. No titles, no walls, just two people standing where their stories had once crossed, now finding each other again. And for the first time in years, Daniel Sterling, the man who built empires, realized he wanted to remember what it felt like to simply be human. The memory came back to Maya like sunlight breaking through clouds. Soft at first, then flooding everything. She was 6 again. The fairground smelled of popcorn and summer rain. Music played from tinny speakers. Laughter floated through the air. Her mother held her hand tightly, trying to smile through exhaustion. Maya remembered losing her balloon, bright red, drifting up into the sky. She cried, quietly at first, then harder when she realized there wouldn't be another one. And that's when she saw him, a boy sitting alone on the curb, a cast on his arm covered in messy signatures. He looked lonely, the way kids do when the world forgets about them. He didn't say much, just smiled, tore his cotton candy in half, and handed her the bigger piece. When she sniffled, he laughed softly and pointed at the sky. "It's okay," he'd said. "Maybe your balloon's just looking for someone else who needs it." So she gave him hers, a red balloon she'd begged her mom for earlier that day. Then, "Maybe it'll find you instead." Her mother had taken a picture then, saying, "Someday, you'll both want to remember this." Maya never knew how true that would be. Now, standing years later in the same city with that man grown and powerful, she realized life had circled back, not by chance, but by something far quieter. Some connections never really fade. They just wait for the right moment to be remembered. Maya couldn't shake the memory after that night. It followed her through the morning bus ride, through the chatter of strangers, through every quiet space she tried to fill with distraction. The past had come alive again, and it carried his face. When she walked into work the next evening, Daniel was already there. No suit jacket this time. Just a man sitting by the window, the city lights reflecting off his tired eyes. He looked up as she entered, almost relieved. "I wasn't sure you'd come back," he said. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "It's a lot to take in." He nodded. "I know." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "That photo, you said you kept it because of me. But why really? Were you not telling me?" Daniel's gaze drifted to the skyline. "Because that day wasn't just a memory for me, Maya. It was the last good day before everything changed." Her heart tightened. "What do you mean?" He exhaled, voice steady but low. "A week after that fair, my father died. My world collapsed overnight. I stopped believing in people, in kindness, in anything that didn't have a price. But then I found that photo again years later, hidden in one of my mother's boxes. You, that little girl, were the reminder that not everything good disappears when life falls apart." Maya stood there, silent. She didn't know what to say. The man everyone called ruthless was speaking like someone who'd finally run out of armor. He looked at her again. "You reminded me of who I was before I became this. That's why I kept it. Not out of obsession, but gratitude." Her throat ached. Gratitude. Such a simple word. But it carried something she hadn't felt in years. Grace. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You didn't owe me anything." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But you gave me something that day, and I never forgot how that felt." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, heavy with everything neither of them could quite say. For the first time, Maya saw him not as a man at the top of the building, but as the boy from the fair, lost, kind, trying to remember how to feel. And for the first time, Daniel saw her not as the woman who cleaned his floors, but as the girl who'd unknowingly changed the course of his life. The truth between them wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, human. And in that quiet, something finally shifted, not in the world around them, but in the space between two people who had finally remembered who they were to each other. The next few nights passed in a blur of silence. Maya kept her head down, working the same floors, emptying the same bins, pretending the air hadn't changed. But it had. Every time she caught her reflection in the glass, she thought of his words, gratitude. It felt too heavy, too big for someone like her. She told herself it meant nothing, that men like Daniel Sterling lived in another world. But then he showed up again. He was waiting near the elevators, sleeves rolled, a folder in his hand. There was something different in his face, less distance, more intent. "Maya," he said quietly, "do you have a minute?" She hesitated. "I'm on the clock." He smiled faintly. "Then I'll make it worth your time." She followed him into the office, uncertain, her pulse loud in her ears. The photo still sat on the desk, exactly where she'd left it. Daniel opened the folder, and slid a sheet toward her. "This is an offer," he said. "A position. Full-time during the day. Better pay. Benefits." She stared at the paper, but didn't touch it. "Why me?" "Because I've watched you work," he said simply. "You don't just clean a room. You take care of it. You bring order to chaos, and somehow you do it with kindness. I need someone like that here." Her throat tightened. "You don't have to do this because of the past." "I'm not," he said. "I'm doing this because of who you are now." Maya shook her head. "I'm not like the people you hire. I don't have a degree or—" He interrupted softly. "Neither did I when I started." She looked up, surprised. He gave a small, almost boyish smile, the one she remembered from the fair, buried beneath years of polish and pressure. "I know what it's like to build yourself from nothing," he said. "You just need someone to believe in you long enough for you to believe it yourself." Her eyes burned, but she blinked the tears away. "I don't want pity." "This isn't pity," Daniel said. "It's a chance." The room went still. The offer lay between them like an unspoken bridge, a fragile, uncertain step towards something neither could name. Finally, Maya whispered, "I'll think about it." Daniel nodded once. "That's all I ask." As she turned to leave, her gaze caught the photograph again. 2 children frozen in time, one hand in the other a red balloon. She smiled softly. For the first time, the memory didn't hurt. It felt like a beginning. And Daniel watched her go, knowing he hadn't just made an offer. He'd reopened a door he never thought he'd find again. Days turned into weeks, and somehow, without either of them meaning to, their worlds began to overlap. Maya took the job. She told herself it was just work, better hours, steady pay, nothing more. But each morning when she walked through the glass doors, something inside her shifted. The building that once felt cold and unreachable now felt alive. Daniel tried to keep his distance at first. He told himself it was professionalism, that he just wanted to make sure she settled in. But every time he passed her desk or caught her laughing softly with a coworker, something in him eased, something that had been locked away for years. Their conversation started small. A good morning that lingered a beat too long. A shared smile at the coffee machine. Little moments that didn't mean much on their own. But together, they began to build something neither dared to name. One evening, they stayed late. The office was quiet, lights dim. The city stretched beneath them in gold and shadow. Maya was reviewing reports, her brow furrowed in focus. Daniel watched her for a moment, then said, "You know, most people wouldn't care enough to check those numbers twice." She looked up, half smiling. Old habits. When you've lived paycheck to paycheck, you learn not to miss the details. He nodded. "Maybe that's why you see things others don't." The words hung in the air. For a moment, she didn't look away, and neither did he. It wasn't romance. Not yet. It was recognition. The quiet understanding of 2 people who'd known struggle in different forms. Later that night, as she packed her bag, he said softly, "Maya, thank you for saying yes." She tilted her head. "To the job." "To being here," he said. "The place feels different with you in it." She didn't answer, but she smiled, a real one, the kind that reached her eyes. And for Daniel, that smile stayed with him long after she'd left the room. He didn't know what this was or where it was leading. He only knew that for the first time in a long time, life felt less like a race and more like a reason. And for Maya, every morning began to feel less like survival and more like hope. It happened on a Tuesday, ordinary, unremarkable, until it wasn't. Maya had stayed late again, the office empty except for the hum of computers and the quiet city outside. She was sorting through files Daniel had asked her to organize, a small gesture of trust that still surprised her. One folder slipped from the stack, scattering papers across the floor. She sighed, knelt to gather them, and that's when she saw it, a document with her name printed across the top. Her stomach tightened. It wasn't a report. It was a file, detailed, personal. Background checks, employment history, even a note about her son. Private things, things she'd never told him. She froze, the papers trembling in her hands. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The room that once felt like safety suddenly felt foreign, heavy with questions. She didn't hear Daniel come in until he spoke her name. Maya. She looked up sharply, the file clutched to her chest. You were looking into me? His expression shifted. Surprise, guilt, something between both. Maya, wait. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Her voice cracked. Because this looks like you've been keeping tabs on me. On my life. Daniel took a step closer, then stopped, his voice low and careful. When I offered you the job, I wanted to make sure you'd be safe here. That's all. I didn't mean to invade. Safe? She interrupted, her eyes burning. You went through everything about me, my son, my address. You don't get to call that safety. He looked at her helplessly. I needed to know I wasn't crossing a line that would hurt you. She let out a shaky laugh, one that sounded more like disbelief. You already did. For the first time, Daniel had no words. The confident man who could handle boardrooms and billion-dollar deals stood silent in front of a woman whose trust he'd just broken. Maya turned away, her voice barely above a whisper. You said you remembered me because I was kind, because I reminded you that good people still exist. I wanted to believe that, but maybe I was just another file to you. He took a step forward, his voice unsteady. Maya, please. But she was already walking away, clutching the folder like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Daniel watched the elevator doors close, the reflection of his own regret staring back at him. For years, he'd built walls around his life to keep it from falling apart. But this time, the thing he wanted to protect was the very thing he'd just lost. And in that quiet, empty office, the distance between them finally became real. The next few days passed like a blur neither of them could escape. Maya stopped taking the early elevator. She waited for the next one, the slower one, the one Daniel never used. She spoke only when necessary, her voice polite but distant. Every word between them now felt like walking on glass. Daniel noticed, of course. He noticed everything. How she avoided his gaze in meetings, how her laughter disappeared, how her desk light went off earlier than usual. The silence she left behind was louder than any argument. By Thursday, he couldn't take it anymore. He found her in the break room after hours, rinsing a mug that didn't need washing. The light flickered slightly above her, a tired hum filling the space between them. Maya, he said quietly. She didn't turn around. If it's about work, you can email me. It's not about work. Her hand stilled under the running water. Then it shouldn't concern me. He took a few steps closer, his voice low. It does concern you, because you matter. And I never wanted to make you feel watched or small. She turned then, eyes sharp with pain. You just what? Needed control? Needed to make sure the girl from your past still fit your idea of who she should be. He flinched at her words. That's not fair. Fair. She let out a bitter laugh. I trusted you. And for a second, I actually thought you saw me, not my story, not my file me. But I was wrong. Maya, he said softly, I made a mistake. I wasn't trying to own your story. I was trying to protect it. To protect you. From what? She asked, her voice trembling now. From the truth? He didn't answer right away. His hands were at his sides, open, almost pleading. For myself, he said finally, her breath hitched, the words catching her off guard. He looked tired, stripped of the armor he usually wore. I've spent years controlling everything around me, he said. The company, the people, my own emotions. I thought if I could predict every outcome, I wouldn't lose anything again. But then you walked in, and suddenly nothing made sense anymore. I didn't know how to handle that. Her anger wavered, just slightly. Beneath it, she saw what she hadn't expected, guilt, not arrogance. I didn't need protection, Daniel, she said softly. I needed honesty. He nodded, his eyes downcast. You deserve that, and I failed you. The silence stretched between them, fragile and heavy. Maya looked at him for a long moment, torn between a hurt that still lingered and the ache that whispered forgiveness. I don't know if I can trust you again, she said. He met her eyes, quiet, steady. Then let me earn it, not with words, with time. For a moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the water dripping from the faucet. One drop, then another, echoing softly in the stillness. And though nothing was fixed, something in the air shifted, a crack of light through the damage. Maya turned away, but this time she didn't walk out, and Daniel stayed, not as her boss, not as a man who had all the answers, but as someone willing to learn how to start over. Maya didn't see him for days after that night. The office felt quieter, almost hollow, like something had been taken out of it. She told herself it was better this way. Distance was safer. But some silences don't bring peace. They just leave room for what's missing. Daniel stayed away on purpose. He needed to. He'd spent his whole life fixing problems with logic, numbers, and control. But this wasn't something he could fix. Not with power, not with strategy. What he'd broken couldn't be repaired by authority. Only humility. So when he finally asked her to meet him, it wasn't in his office or the conference room. It was at the small cafe across the street, the one she liked. Though he'd never told her he noticed, she hesitated before walking in. When she saw him, he was already waiting, no suit, no briefcase, just a man with tired eyes and coffee growing cold in front of him. "Maya," he said quietly as she sat down. "Thank you for coming." "I almost didn't," she admitted. "I know." He looked down at his hands, then back at her. "You were right to be angry. I crossed a line. I told myself it was about safety, about care, but really it was about control, and I'm sorry." The words weren't rehearsed or dressed in charm. They came out raw, hesitant, human. "I didn't realize how much I'd started to depend on you," he continued. "Not as an employee, not as someone from my past, but as a person who made me feel grounded. And I let that turn into fear. Fear of losing you. So I tried to hold on in the only way I knew how, by controlling what I couldn't understand." Maya's throat tightened. She hadn't expected him to be this honest. "Daniel," she said softly, "you don't need to apologize for caring, but you do need to learn what it means to trust." He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm trying." For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, the city carried on. Cars passing, laughter spilling from somewhere down the street. Life moving as if the two of them weren't sitting in the middle of a quiet reckoning. Finally, she said, "I can forgive you, but I need to move slowly." "I wouldn't ask for anything else," he said. Her eyes met his, and for the first time since everything fell apart, there was no anger, no defense, just a fragile calm. Something almost like understanding. She stood to leave, and he did too. For a second, they just looked at each other. Two people learning that real apologies aren't made of words, but of change. As she walked away, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not relief, not closure, but hope. A quiet, patient hope that maybe forgiveness wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of a new one. Weeks passed. The chill of early winter began to fade, replaced by soft sunlight spilling over the skyline. The city felt alive again, and for the first time in a long while, so did Maya. She had taken extra shifts at a new office downtown. The work was quieter, simpler, but she liked it that way. There was peace in routine, in starting over. Still, sometimes when she walked by the glass building of Sterling Dynamics, her steps slowed, just for a moment. She never expected to see him again. It happened one afternoon, almost by accident. She was leaving the cafe near the old office, the same cafe where they'd last spoken, when she heard her name. "Maya." She turned. Daniel stood there, no suit, no entourage, just a paper cup in his hand, and that same unsure smile she remembered. She blinked, surprised. "Daniel, I thought you'd be in New York." "I was," he said, walking closer. "But I came back. There are some things you can't finish from a distance." She hesitated, unsure what to say. He looked different somehow, lighter. The hard edges that once defined him had softened. "I didn't want to bother you," he added, voice low. "I just wanted to see how you were." "I'm okay," she said, and for once, it was mostly true. He nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. "Good. You deserve okay." They stood there in the afternoon light, the world moving around them. People talking, horns honking, wind tugging at their hair, and yet it felt like time had paused just for them. He glanced toward the cafe window. where a family was laughing over shared pastries. "You know," he said softly, "I kept your note, the one from years ago." Maya frowned. "What note?" "The one you left with that photo. You wrote, 'Never forget where you came from. It's what keeps you kind.'" Her eyes widened. "You still have that?" He smiled faintly. "I kept it on my desk every single day. Reminded me that success isn't about power. It's about people. About remembering the ones who made you believe in yourself when you couldn't." Something warm spread through her chest, like sunlight breaking through cloud. "Daniel," she said softly, "you don't owe me anything." "I know," he replied, "but I like the chance to give something anyway. Not a job, not money, just time, maybe coffee, maybe conversation." She studied him, really looked, the humility in his eyes, the sincerity in his voice. For a moment, she saw not the man who had once hurt her, but the boy she'd met long ago, lost, kind, holding on to hope like it was all he had. A small smile tugged at her lips. "Coffee, huh?" He grinned, a hint of relief in it. "Black. No sugar, right?" She laughed softly. "You remembered." "I never forgot." They walked back inside together, not as employer and employee, not as the CEO and the cleaner, but as two people who had once found each other in the dark and were now learning how to walk toward the light again. Sometimes, reunions aren't about grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes they're just about showing up quietly, honestly, and hoping the other person is still there when you do. And this time they both, a few months later, the office walls looked different, not because the furniture had changed, but because life had. Maya now worked on the executive floor, though her desk sat by the window, not behind a door. She'd agreed to return, not out of forgiveness alone, but because the place finally felt different, less polished, more human. Daniel had learned to slow down. Meetings ended earlier, conversations lingered longer. He'd start to ask questions, not about numbers or deals, but about people, about what made them stay, about what made them proud. One afternoon, Maya found a small envelope on her desk. No name on it, just her initials written in Daniel's careful handwriting. Inside was a photograph, slightly faded, edges worn. The fairground. A little girl with tangled hair, holding a red balloon. Beside her, a boy with a broken arm, grinning through the pain. Tucked behind the photo was a note. "You once gave away your only balloon to make someone else feel less alone. You've been doing that ever since. Thank you for reminding me what it means to be kind." Her throat tightened. She turned the photo over. On the back, written in faint blue ink, were her mother's words from years ago. "Someday, you'll both want to remember this." Maya smiled, tears softening her vision. She didn't realize Daniel had stepped into the doorway until he spoke. "I found it in one of my old boxes," he said quietly. "I thought maybe it should be yours." She looked up at him. Not the CEO, not the man from her past, but someone who had finally learned how to be present. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, his voice just above a breath. "You were right, you know. Some things don't fade." She smiled. They just wait to be remembered. Outside, the city shimmered beneath the setting sun, golden light spilling through the glass, catching the edge of that old photograph on her desk. And in that small, quiet office, two people stood side by side, not bound by the past, but by what they'd built through it. Forgiveness, growth, and the kind of connection that outlasts mistakes. The same balloon that once floated away had somehow found its way back. Full circle. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Heartfelt Tales TV, where every story reminds us that kindness, even in the smallest moments, can change everything.